And now I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar titled Project Management Tips and Tricks for Your Personal and Professional Life. Before I hand things over to our featured presenter today, Jason Hollinsworth, I'd like to tell you a bit about him. Jason is a technical trainer with New Horizons, and his experiences as a senior corporate trainer and project manager for Fidelity Mortgage, a senior account executive for FedEx Services, and a general business manager for a major retail chain have allowed him to add a touch of real-world insight to a variety of our already outstanding project management classes. Jason's passion for coaching others to success was the drive that brought him to New Horizons, a bonus for any class type live or virtual, and we're very honored to have him speak with us this morning. Jason, you now have the floor.
All right, Mike, thank you very much for that introduction. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to Project Management Tips and Tricks for Your Personal and Professional Life. It has always been amazing to me as I go through these different project management materials, how much of this material can not only tie into the everyday business world, but also what we do day to day in our own personal lives. That's going to be primarily the focus of the course today. But I do want to review quickly an agenda with you. Notice how the very first thing on the agenda is the purpose and your constraints. Every single project, bar none, every single project has got to have a purpose. There's got to be a purpose. What is the objective we're trying to achieve? What is the problem we're trying to solve? What is the opportunity we're trying to take advantage of? What is the purpose of our project? What's the purpose of our projects at home? What's the purpose of our projects in business? So we're going to talk a little about laying out that problem, that overall problem statement. We're going to talk about our constraints. Look, you all know there's not a single one of you out there that have worked on projects that didn't have a deadline, that didn't have a budget. Of course, you've got to deal with your constraints. So we'll talk about setting up that overall problem statement. We'll talk about those constraints. And then we're going to roll into planning for achieving the objectives that we set. All right. In project management, the word plan is always the how. I'm serious. If you are working on projects and you hear the word plan, it's the how. Procurement management plan, risk management plan, cost management plan, schedule management plan. It's the how. So how are we going to achieve those goals that we set? We've got a plan. Honestly, everyone, when it comes to project management, tips and tricks, personal and professional, I hope you take this note. I genuinely do, from the bottom of my heart. Take it from someone who traveled 50 different states, developing training materials, whether loan officers had to be licensed or certified in each individual state. Please make this note. You cannot have quality time without quantity time. Write that down, underline it, and put a star beside it. You cannot have quality time without quantity time. I mean it personally and professionally. You want a solid, well-rounded project management plan? You're going to have to invest the quantity time. You want to have a better understanding and control of your risks during a project. How much time are you investing in your risk management plan? So we're going to talk about setting up the purpose of the project. We're going to talk about a problem statement. And the bottom line is, folks, Haas, you don't understand. Jason, you don't understand. Look, we don't have time. We've got 28 different projects and we've got 7 different resources that are being shared across these projects. We don't have time to invest in planning. Then maybe we need a culture change. I can tell you this. I've traveled to most major businesses in the Pittsburgh area. Truly, most of them. Teaching everything from project management to Lean Six Sigma. And I will tell you this. What you spend in time planning you will save that time in more and more during execution. Because if you take the quantity time to have a quality plan and you hit executing, which is number 3 on the slide, all you're going to do is work the plan. That's it, personally and professionally. And then all of this is for naught if you don't sustain it. So we have this brand new process that we just rolled out to solve a particular problem within our organization or a particular problem at home. And then we don't sustain it. We go back to the old ways of doing things. We just wasted a whole lot of time, talent, energy, and money. All right, everyone, the purpose. Look, the purpose for a project, I'm going to go as far as to say the purpose for a meeting. If you don't have a purpose for a project, if you don't have a purpose for a meeting, why are you working on the project? Why are you conducting the meeting? In reality, a lot of the purpose of your project, personally or professionally, a lot of it can be summed up in a well-written problem statement. A well-written problem statement, everyone. All right, I'm going to go through some of the different elements that you might want to consider including in your problem statements. Number 1, what's the current state of your problem? Now, we are not just going to give the current state of our problem, but we're also going to put it in terms of a given measure. All right, so what does that mean? What does that mean, Jason? Right now, the way things sit, let's imagine that we have a 17% defect rate. All right, in our organization, that's a problem. 17% defect rate. That is the current state of our problem in a given measure. That's number 1. First thing you want in your problem statement. We are currently at a 17% defect rate. Number 2, in your problem statement, we need a goal. All right, there's got to be a goal for the measure. Right now, we are at a 17% defect rate. Our goal for our organization is to be at a 2% defect rate. That's the goal. We're at 17%. We want to be at 2%. What does that give us, everyone? Well, it gives us a gap. It gives us a gap. Right now, between 17 and 2, we're at a 15% gap. So first off, everyone, we want to know what our current state of the problem is in a given measure. We then want to understand the goal for that measure and establish our gap. Now, the third thing is to set an objective for the project that is going to state how much of that 15% gap are we looking to close with this project? All right, we're at 17%, we want to be at 2%. That's a 15% gap. How much will this one project actually close of that particular gap? And really, personally or professionally, you may not be able to achieve your overall goal with just one project. It might take multiple projects. But the third thing you want in your problem statement, and everyone, don't you worry, I'm going to give you all 2 excellent examples of problem statements in the very next slide. But ultimately, how much of that gap do you want to close with this one particular project? Now, by closing that gap, understand that from a project perspective, personally or professionally, we want to understand what the value is to us. What is the value to us when it comes to actually achieving that closure of that gap? What is the monetary value tied to this objective? All right, in business, it's going to be tied to monetary value. In your personal life, what's the value to you personally? What's the cost? What is the cost to poor quality if we don't implement this particular project? All right, so your monetary value of the overall objective that you're looking to close, that is number 4. What's the value associated with it? And then finally, number 5, everyone, finally, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we fit this with a timeline. Because if you don't have a deadline, if you don't have a timeline, it's going to be pushed back. It's going to be put on the back burner. It's going to be procrastinated. And then we won't achieve any closure of the gap. All right, everyone, I promised you a couple of very strong examples. Here are those strong examples. Now, the first example is what I was giving you in the last slide. However, what they've done is they've attached a timeline to it. So here we go. 17% defect rate, goals 2%, 15% gap. That gap is costing the business $7.4 million. The goal of the project is we want to reduce that gap. So this one project is going to reduce the gap by 50%. We're going to do it by November of 2021. That'll put our process defect rates at 7.5%, saving us $3.7 million. Everyone, that is a strong problem statement. Check out number 2. Now, number 2 actually relates it to cycle time. Not a defect rate, no, cycle time. So our cycle time, as far as getting this product ready to ship, has been 64 minutes since Q1 of 2020. However, the production requirements are now putting the cycle time at a goal of 48 minutes. Well, there's your gap, everyone. You've got a 16-minute gap. That 16-minute gap, right? It's costing us $296,000. The goal of the project is to reduce the cycle time by the full 16 minutes by Q4 2021, giving us the full $296,000 cost savings. I hope you take the tip. I hope you take the trick and you start looking at a well-written problem statement. All right, everyone, well, look, we have to understand the work that's going to be involved in order to close the gap. We've got to have a good understanding of what is included in this project and what is excluded in this project. That means we're going to need a scope statement. So what's your scope statement? Well, how are you going to go about achieving the work? How are you going to go about closing the gap? What work do we have to accomplish in order to get those benefits that we described on that last slide? You need a scope statement. Now, the scope statement is going to lay out your deliverables. Those deliverables are what we need to achieve, the tangible items, the things that we can track to make sure that we're making progress toward the goal. Those deliverables can be broken down into work packages, things we have to do in order to achieve those deliverables, those tangible items. The work packages can be broken down to the activity level. But understand this, in your scope statement, you need a frame, you need a guardrail around what it is your project is looking to achieve. Why? Because if you don't, you're going to go completely off track. I'm guessing a lot of you realize this already. The number one reason globally that projects go over budget and get behind schedule is because of scope creep. It's because of scope creep. We just add more and more work and we don't reset our cost and time baselines. So our scope statement is what is included, the work that we're going to conduct, and what is excluded. All right, well, what does that mean, Jason? That means that from your lessons learned in previous projects, and again, personally, professionally, the lessons you've learned, those can be applied to your exclusions. You know that you don't want to do that again. You know that's not the direction you want to head. It can be right there in your scope statement. Now understand this, everyone. The idea of your scope. Why did we start out? Why did we start out talking about the scope statement? Because in a plan-based project, and mind you, we'll talk just a little bit about Agile, but in a plan-based project, everyone, you need this. This is the number one thing we're looking for right here. Personally and professionally, what is the scope that I need to actually achieve? What is the work that I need to get done? That's number one. And so at the end of formulating that scope statement and understanding what I need to include in the project, I'm going to set a baseline right here. I want to set a baseline as far as here's the work we're looking to achieve. Now, based upon that work, based upon this amount of work and the amount of resources I have available, here's how much time it's going to take. And I set a baseline. So now I know my resources that are available to complete the work. I lay the work out that needs to be accomplished. And based upon these resources and this scope, it should take me this much time. All right, we'll take it a step further. Based upon this scope, this much time, these resources, it should cost us this much. What you are looking at on this slide is referred to as your triple constraints. The triple constraints. So you've nailed down what you're looking at as far as your purpose of the project. You have a well-written problem statement. You understand now the scope of work you need to achieve. Then you can start thinking about the resources and time it'll take. And once you have the resources assigned and the time it'll take, that lays out your cost for you. Now, our job with this iron triangle of project management, or also referred to as the triple constraints, our job as a project manager is to hold this triangle in equilibrium. Meaning, if the scope of work increases, it is going to affect at least one of your other two baselines. Normally, it's going to affect both. So with that said, if I increase my scope of work, I'm going to need to increase at least my time or my cost. Usually it's going to be both. And it doesn't matter what happens to your scope, your cost, your time, everyone. This right here, smack dab in the middle, it has to be there. Because if this isn't there, and this is a personal project, you're not going to be happy. You're not going to be satisfied. It's not bringing value to you. If this isn't there in regards to a professional project, ladies and gentlemen, then your deliverable is going to be rejected. Your customer, your end user won't accept your product or service. And then you, again, it's all for naught. You've wasted time, talent, energy, and money. So at the end of the day, it's all based on a plan-based project. It's all based off of the scope of work. You've got to define the scope. Now, once you define the scope, you can start looking at your time. All right, everyone, please make a note. Every single project manager out there, every single PM out there, including program managers, they absolutely should determine their critical path. Meaning, what is the longest chain of linked activities through your overall network, through your overall project? Well, here you've got one path of linked activities that's going to take 10 days. Here you've got a path that's taking 7 days. Well, what does this mean? This means if activity A or activity B, if either one of these activities get extended, it's going to extend your project. It's going to push you past your deadline. So these two activities, A and B, this has got to be your primary focus as a project manager. Activity C, you've got float, you've got slack. As a matter of fact, you could positively procrastinate this activity. You could take resources from C, apply them to A or B, just to help keep these two on track so you don't surpass 10 days. Now look, you look at your activities, you sequence them, and everybody, that is a key part. That is a key part of your timeline. That's a key part of your schedule. So we've looked at your scope. Now we're breaking the scope down into a schedule. We're breaking it down to the activity level and sequencing those activities. So as I look at this particular slide, we've got activity C. It actually has two predecessors, B and F. Activity C has one successor, that's activity D. The only activities without a predecessor are your very first activities, A and F. The only activities without a successor are your very last activities, which here are E and J. So you're breaking down these deliverables, everyone, into actionable items, into activities or tasks, and then you sequence them accordingly. You fill in your resources, and there's your schedule. So you've got your scope, you've got your schedule, and now you are more able to determine your overall budget. I'll tell you this, I love this slide. I love this slide. It gives you a great example of what actually goes into a budget. So first off, you have your activity cost estimates. So every single activity that you sequenced is going to have a duration and it's going to have resources. So there's going to be a cost associated with that. And then on top of the cost for the activity, you have to put in your contingency reserve. This is additional money that you put in so that you can deal with those risks that you know about, the risks that are on the risk register. Okay, so you have your activity contingency reserves for the risks that you know about. That establishes your work package cost estimate. All the activities in the work package along with their contingencies. If your company deems it necessary, you might put in a contingency reserve again at the work package level. All right, normally if it's done at the activity level, you can skip the work package, but the option's there for you. Now, when it talks here about a control account, this is for accounting purposes, saying that there might be multiple work packages within one control account, so that when your financial department pays for the activities, it at least goes into the correct accounts, and we can audit it accordingly. Everyone, this is what sets your cost baseline right here. This is what sets your cost baseline. And then if your senior level managers want to add in a little bit of management reserve, what's that for? That is for the unknown risks. Those risks that we could have never seen coming, and therefore we would have never known their impact to the project. So senior level managers might set aside a little bit of management reserve. Everyone, for personal projects, by golly, you'd better have a little bit of management reserve. You better have some contingency. Have you been to Lowe's lately to check out the price of lumber? And then what that does is it gives you your cost baseline, your management reserve. It gives you an overall project budget. All right, so you've got your purpose, you've got your triple constraints as far as scope, time, and cost. And now what we do is we go ahead and plan. It's the how. All right, well, look, personally, professionally, there's going to be a large variation as far as the size of personal and professional projects. But at the end of the day, remember the old cliche. If you're failing to plan, then you're planning to fail. You've all heard that, and it's absolutely true. So we're going to look at some tips, we're going to look at some tricks as far as actually tracking and conducting these little to large to-do items. All right, now, if you're planning and organizing, make sure that you are keeping in mind the size of your project. If your goal, everybody, is to do nothing more than just organize your inbox, for example, then it's probably not necessary to, spend a few hours planning each one of your activities. On the other hand, if you are handed over this really complex project, you might want to spend several weeks gathering information and creating a detailed project management plan. Yeah, I mean, I get it. If they're small tasks, fine. Use your basic tools, use your to-do list, your calendar, that's great. If it's a medium-sized project, maybe you want to use a RACI. Maybe you want to use some visual timelines. I'll give you an example of a RACI here in just a moment. It is a widely used and very valuable tool. For larger projects, Gantt charts, maybe a piece of software, Microsoft Project, Primavera, Jira, some type of just an online tracking tool. All right. one of the most widely used, everyone, one of the most widely used planning tools to help us assign responsibility is your RAM. Now, the type of RAM, responsibility assignment matrix, the type of RAM that is most often used is the RACI. Responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. Now, what you're going to see down the left-hand column there, those are your work packages. Those are your activities that need to be achieved. The responsible resources that you have listed in the responsible column, they actually do the work. They perform the work. The accountable resources, they have full accountability for the work. The buck stops there. The consulted resources, they give you the subject matter expertise. Your SMEs. And the informed resources, what do? Well, the informed resources, they get updates. These are your managers. These are the frontline people that need updates about the work status. Understand, everyone, and this is the note that I hope you take about this. There is only one person at any given time that is accountable. You may have multiple people that are responsible. You may have multiple people that you are consulting. You might have to inform numerous individuals. There's one person that's accountable. Okay, Haas. Okay, Jason, why? Why is there only one person that's accountable? It's so you don't get this stuff. It's so you don't get this. You don't get the finger pointing. If things go south with your baselines, you don't want the finger pointing. That's why this RACI is so widely used, and it's really a valuable tool. It really a valuable tool in the real world. All right. Well, if I'm planning, everyone, I may, especially in a plan-based project, I may develop a work breakdown structure. I may take this project that at first, this project looks very overwhelming. I mean to tell you, there is a ton of work involved here. How do we make a lot of work? How do we make it less overwhelming? We break it down into manageable chunks, right? We break it down into phases or deliverables. And then, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's broken into phases. It doesn't matter if it's broken into deliverables. It doesn't matter if it's broken into both. You can have both. You then take those phases or deliverables and break them into work packages. You take the work packages and break them into activities. It just makes that overwhelming amount of work look a whole lot more manageable. That's the idea of your work breakdown structure. It helps you plan how you're going to achieve your overall objective. It helps you plan your work. Well, maybe you're in an agile. Maybe you're in an agile world. In an agile world, take a look at this. Our planning is going to be done right here. There's your planning. So you've got this, what they're looking at here, this large amount of work. Okay, they're referring to it as a product backlog. What that is a large amount of work or a large amount of features that need to be developed. All right, work that needs to be done. We then plan during what's referred to as a sprint planning meeting. We then plan for the work that we're going to accomplish in a 1 to 4 week period. All right, I know here it gives you the example of 2 to 4 weeks, but it's 1 to 4 weeks, depending upon what's most comfortable for your organization. So you take this manageable piece of work that you can accomplish in a time-boxed period, and you start to actually conduct the work. Now, every 24 hours, every morning when you come in, your team, your Agile team, is going to talk about what they did yesterday, what they're going to do today, and what hurdles they hit. At the end of that 1 to 4 week period, you're going to have some type of a deliverable, some type of an increment, some type of maybe potentially shippable product. And then once you look at your release agreement and see how this customer is ultimately going to be accepting this deliverable or accepting this product or accepting this increment, then you roll right back into a sprint planning meeting. What does that mean? That means that you then plan for this next increment. So Agile is incremental planning. I'm going to go ahead and plan for the next increment out of this large body of work that we need to conduct. This is the idea of the functionality of Agile planning. It is incremental and iterative. So I'm going to plan for this iteration for 1 to 4 weeks. I'm going to plan after that 1 to 4 weeks. I'm going to plan for the next iteration. It's iterative and incremental. All right, look, everyone, if we take the tip that we heard at the very beginning of this little presentation, and we say, okay, Jason, the fact of the matter is that you started out saying that if you take the quantity time in order to have the quality project management plan, right? In order to get the quality plan, I got to take the quantity time. If we do this, what you're looking at right here will be much more flawless. Now, will it be perfect? No, of course not. There's not going to be a perfect plan ever. Come on now, be honest with yourselves. In this class, how many of you out there have ever worked on a project that went perfect to scope, perfect to budget, and perfect to schedule? It's a unicorn, isn't it? It's a unicorn. So when you look at executing, if you've done your due diligence and you truly have a quality plan, executing is nothing more. It's nothing more than just working the plan. And the more time you spend in planning, truly, the less time you are going to have to spend putting out fires. Quote me on that. All right. So when you're executing, you're directing and managing project work. You're accomplishing all of that planned work on the project, right? You're following the plan. And then, as we carry out these different activities, sure, we're going to face some hurdles. There's going to be issues. Yeah. There's going to be some variance in our work performance. No plan is perfect. But our team needs to realize that, look, they're isolating these incidents. They're working through issues. They're flat out getting the job done. They're executing. And what we're doing is we're monitoring. We're monitoring, controlling variance, everyone. Here's what we had planned. Here are our baselines for scope, for schedule, right? Here's our baseline for budget. Now, here's what we're actually spending. Here's how much time it's actually taking. Here's the scope of work we're actually performing. And we're monitoring the plan versus actual. That produces a variance. That's what you're looking for in executing. And sure enough, we're going to monitor variances from plan versus actual, and we're going to see that some assumptions that we made weren't exactly on point. There's going to be some areas that come across better than others, especially in more complex projects. And we may be submitting change requests and getting approved change requests and then getting adjustments to our baselines. If we increase the scope, we've got to increase at least one of the other two baselines. Remember, holding that triangle in equilibrium. Directing and manage the project work, everybody. Fact of the matter is, we're generating the deliverables now. Okay. 168. Write it down, underline it, put a star beside it. 168. That's what you've got. It doesn't matter what your job title is. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your background is. You have 168. That is the number of hours you have in a week. And when you are looking personally and professionally at completing projects and conducting projects and executing on the plan, you could be tying your whole 168 up into your project, or you could be taking advantage of the other people that are on your team and multiplying your 168. You could be delegating efficiently and effectively and increasing that 168, multiplying it across 4, 5, 6, 7 people. So when you are executing personally and professionally, are you in fact taking advantage of the multiplication standard as far as other people's 168 as well? That 168 goes up real quick when you multiply it across 5 people. And I just want to, before I go on to the next slide, I just want to draw your attention to this. All right, please understand that the very first thing you want to reserve time for out of your 168 so that you can perform better on your projects and you can bring an attitude in every single day that you want your people to mirror. I'll tell you this, the first thing you take time for is time for you. Boy, I hope you wrote that down. And that comes from an individual in front of you right now on this camera that has 4 kids that are all involved in sports. The number one thing you take time for, that you schedule out of your 168, is time for you. Hoss, you understand? No, everyone, I get it. Now, when you're executing on your project, what are you going to do? Are you going to use your 168? Or are you going to delegate efficiently and effectively so you can multiply that 168 across a number of people? Even if they're look, I understand. Hoss, you know, look, we've got part-time resources that are working part-time to projects. Are we utilizing those resources in the most efficient and effective manner? Because I'll tell you this, whenever you're executing, look at the 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule. The top 20% of your actions will generate 80% of your results in executing. The top 20% of your risks will generate 80% of the problems in your project. If you don't believe me, I dare you to go back and look at your risk registers. The top 20% of your customers will generate 80% of your revenues. Across the board, everybody, you're going to find that this 80-20 rule, it pretty much applies to most things in life. When you're executing, I'm telling you, the top 20% of your activities that you conduct daily are going to generate 80% of your results. Well, what happens? What happens when those things flood in that we weren't expecting? What happens when those daily activities that our inbox is already stacked through the roof, those daily activities roll in? What happens then? Well, this is a fantastic way when you're executing to look at how to handle those things that just, you know, those things that just happen, those unexpected activities, those unexpected tasks. The urgent and important matrix. Many of you may be using this right now. You look at these activities that roll in, and the first thing you look for is to see if they're important. Well, what does that mean? That means, do they apply directly to your goals? Do they? If they do, they're important. And if they need to be done immediately, they're urgent. Those are the first things you want to do. Those are the first things you want to knock out. It needs done now, and it's directly tied to my goals. Secondly, you've got important but not urgent. What does this mean? All right, it's directly tied to my goals. It's important. It's important to me. Right? It's important to the goals of it's important to the goals that we want to achieve. But it's not urgent, meaning we've got a little bit of time to conduct it. We're going to do that next. I am telling you all right now, as well as I'm sitting in this chair, it is this one right here. If you can get a good grasp on that one, you're going to be good to go. I'm very serious when I say that. What is this? Well, this is urgent but not important, meaning it doesn't affect your goals. It doesn't. Not at all. But somebody calls you. Somebody walks into your cubicle or office. And sure enough, it's very important to them. It directly impacts their goals. And they call you, or they walk into your office and they have a sense of urgency like no other. Look, everyone, this is the hardest one. I get that. It's not directly applied to your goals. It's urgent to someone else. Look, Sam, Sally, I would love to be able to do that for you. As a matter of fact, I will put that on my schedule for 1:30 p.m. tomorrow. This is the big one. If we can understand what's urgent to others, but not important to us, and we can in our minds realize that this is something we need to postpone, it's a big help. And then lastly, you've got not urgent, not important. It doesn't apply to your goals. It isn't urgent. Why are we doing it? Is it a distraction? Why is it even on your task list? I really hope you all look at this in regards to tasks, emails. It can apply to so many different things. Really helping you with execution. All right, and then the last little section we have is on sustaining, everyone. And I'm going to roll out 5S. If you are in a lean organization, then you probably live by 5S, 7 Deadly Muda, 5S, right? This is actually, when we talk about personal and professional project management tips and tricks, everyone, to me, this is phenomenal. Why? Because it helped me in my personal life. So by golly, I'm going to share it with you. All right, what we have as far as 5S, this is what and again, this is applied to a whole lot. If you're in a lean workplace, you've seen it. And the whole intent here, everyone, it's to just bring better order, better organization to your company, and then keep it that way. So you've got 5 Japanese terms here that luckily there's a direct English translation that also starts with an S, which is sorting, straightening, shining, standardizing, and sustaining. All right, so we're rolling out these new processes. We're rolling out these new products or services. All right, well, how do we go about making sure that we sustain? Well, first off, let's go ahead and work on our environment. Let's go ahead and work on our workplace. How do we go about sorting? So now that we have these new processes, we might have new tools and new materials. We now go through the workplace and we separate the tools, the parts, our supplies, our materials. We separate them into 2 groups. What do we actually need and what is unneeded? Well, once we identify the unneeded stuff, get rid of it. Get it out of your life. All right, well, Jason, what happens when we're not sure? We're not sure whether we need it or not. All right, well, just store it away for some predetermined period of time. You know, if you haven't used it for 2 months, do you really need it? And then once you have your needed items, sort them in order of priority. That's the idea of sorting. All right, well, we need to straighten or set things in order. So we can label each one of the items that we prioritized and kept. We can label each one of those items and then label an appropriate location to actually store those items. Ideally speaking, as you're labeling your locations, try to reduce motion. All right, if you're storing the most frequently used items in the most convenient locations, that actually promotes the sustainability, that your people are more willing to sustain it. It just gives you a more efficient workflow path. All right, and then you have shining. It's a great idea for many, many, many reasons, not only for maintaining, but it's just a great way to have your workplace to keep it clean. Make sure that all the items are now in their labeled positions. The trick to this, everybody, as far as shining, is just to get your team to take pride in it, to own it. Think about this from a personal perspective in regards to 5S. I know, look, there's 6 people in my household, right? It's all about getting my 4 kids to take pride in this. Keeping things clean and organized. And then you look at standardization. We're removing the variation across workstations if we can. We try and replicate now the 5S workstation. so that people can come in to different workstations and know where things are and get work done, more easily perform their job. And then everyone, lastly, you have sustaining. Look, it takes discipline. It takes discipline to maintain 5S. It does. And obviously on top of discipline, it also takes time. You've got to spend the quantity time if you want a quality 5S system. Why does it take time, Jason? It takes time for new habits to form, everyone. It takes time to maybe shift your entire culture within a team so that you actually follow this type of methodology. Look, when you talk about project management and you talk about closing gaps and you saving money and being more efficient and effective, it is absolutely critical that we don't fall back into the old ways of doing things. Keep your momentum. Identify new projects, identify better ways of optimizing. Look for better ways of just setting things in order and reducing waste. Look for better ways of conducting processes and better new and improved products and services. And ladies and gentlemen, I genuinely hope there's something, some little tip, some little trick, something you took from this 45 minutes that you can use to tweak your blueprint, that you can take back to your office, your organization, your home, and tweak your blueprint just a little bit so that you get a little bit different, a little bit, maybe even better building. In summary, everyone, the purpose. The purpose is having that problem statement. If you don't have a purpose, why are you working on the project? Why are you having the meeting? The constraints, your scope, your time, your cost. Planning, have the work breakdown structure or go agile with it. When you're executing, you're working the plan, you're looking at your baseline versus actual. And at the end of the day, you're sustaining using something like 5S. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, what questions, what concerns do you have? Put them in the chat box.
Thank you so much, Jason. And yes, as Jason said, if anyone has any questions, please take a moment to type them to the questions box, preferably the questions box, not the chat box, so we see them, and we'll get to them shortly. And if you're interested in the materials presented in this webinar, or if you have questions regarding available course offerings, please contact your local New Horizons Center for further information. You can log on to newhorizons.com and do a zip code search for the center nearest you. Our webinar schedule is also up to date on our website, www.newhorizons.com. Just click on the webinars link to view the full schedule and register for any upcoming sessions. And a friendly reminder that we will be sending out the recording link to today's webinar tomorrow. So Jason, first question, do you have any suggestions for how a team can come together to agree on a goal?
In many cases, to bring your team to consensus, you could have something as simple as a voting process. I know it sounds simple, but truly, you say, all right, well, how many? Let's say we're trying to figure out the duration of an activity. How many days, how many hours do you feel this activity should take? And you let people vote. Some people will say, all right, well, it'll take 3 hours. It'll take 7 hours. It'll take 4, 5, 6 hours. And then you take the people that have the lowest vote and the highest vote. And you say, all right, why? Why would you feel that this activity is going to take 3 hours? Give us some insights. Why would you feel this activity is going to take 7 hours? Give us some insights. And allow them to do that. Allow them to be heard. And then once they give the insights, have everybody on your project team, have them re-vote. And then what's going to happen is you're going to start closing that gap. You're going to come closer and closer to consensus. Maybe you can't come to consensus. So what do? Well, we say, all right, some of you are saying 5 days. Some of you are saying 3 days. Maybe you want to go with plurality and say, all right, well, the majority of the group gets the duration. Maybe you want to go with something like 50%. 50% of the group has to agree. If they agree, if it's over 50%, we go with that duration. I hope that answers your question a little or gives you some clear insight. Thank you for the question, by the way.
Excellent. The next one is, how do you identify accurate timelines when a senior leader most times wants a project done in 3 to 5 days?
All right. There's a few different ways. There's a few different ways of putting together an accurate timeline. The number one, by far and away, there's not even a close second. The number one most accurate way of putting together a timeline is a bottom-up estimate. What's the problem with this? Well, the problem with it is it takes time. That's it. You want the number one most effective quality estimating technique, it's going to take quantity time. If you don't have that quantity time, then you're going to have to go with something like maybe something like a top-down estimate, analogous estimating, where we take historical data from previous similar projects and we hand that information over to an experienced project manager. Now, the key to this is they've got to be an experienced project manager, because you're just going to hand them more or less a big blob of time. And you're going to say, all right, Mr. or Mrs. Project Manager, go ahead and trickle that down over your project. And if you hand that to somebody who's inexperienced, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. Maybe you use something like parametric estimating. We know that 1 square foot of heated space is going to take, a day to build. And mind you, I'm no contractor. This is just coming off the top of my head. 1 square foot of heated space will take a day to build. We need 20,000 square feet. 1 square foot of heated space will take 6 hours to build. We need 20,000 square feet. Now, the thing with parametric estimating and why bottom-up estimating is number one most accurate is because parametric estimating, yeah, it's fast. And by golly, if your senior level manager wants these estimates really, really quickly, and they want this and they need it within 3 to 5 days or very, very quickly, then you might want to use a combination of analogous and parametric. Because the problem with parametric, what happens if you have old Hoss here trying to estimate your times, and I'm no contractor, and I give you a time of 6 hours, and you plug that into an equation that's 20,000 square feet, but come to find out it's actually a day and a half. That estimate's not worth the paper it's written on. So when you look at estimating, when you look at putting together a schedule, bottom-up estimating for your schedule is number one. And then at the end of the day, there are other estimating techniques if you want to do it faster. But if you want quality, it takes quantity time. Slide number one, everybody.
Excellent, thank you. And then you talked about scope creep, but can the objective legitimately change after a project is started, and how would you manage if it does?
It has to go through integrated change control. Oh my gosh. Everyone, this could be its own class. Scope creep could absolutely be its own class. Once you set your baselines, please understand at the end of planning that those baselines, they change. They're absolutely going to change. Your requirements in the project are going to change. So if there are approved change requests that change the requirements, that change the scope of work, that's got to be put through integrated change control, to where if you get an approved change request, you change the scope of work. And then when that's approved, you also get the approval for the additional budget or the additional timeline. And those two baselines have to change as well. So if I'm looking at tracking variance and I don't change my baselines to reflect the approved changes of the project, then I'm going to suffer from scope creep. All of my time and my cost is going to be based off of a scope of work that is nothing like what I'm conducting now. So when you have an approved change request, you've got to send it through integrated change control to update your other two baselines. And in some of our classes, you will see things like earned value calculations, to where if you don't do this, your earned value calculations and your variance will be completely off. Look, I hate to say this, be this direct, but it's true. If you don't have integrated change control for your scope, there is no possible way that your projects are as efficient and effective as they could be. There's no possible way, period. You tell me, how would you plan a project that you have no idea what the scope of work is? How would you plan a schedule, or how would you plan a budget if you don't know, if you have no idea what your requirements are? Unless you go Agile with it. I hope that helps.
Yeah. And the next one is, what is a Gantt chart? You mentioned a Gantt chart earlier.
Yeah. A Gantt chart is a visual representation of the breakdown of activities that needs to be achieved. There was a gentleman by the name of Gantt that discovered during a world war that if he put the activities on a visual display for building warships for the US Navy, that those warships were built 30% faster. So when you have a Gantt chart, you're actually planning via a visual display of the activities that need to be achieved by your team. If the team can see it, if they can see what needs to be accomplished and the sequencing and order that it needs to be accomplished in, it absolutely, if you don't believe me, try it. It absolutely brings more efficiency to the team itself. Having that visualization of what we need to achieve.
All right, I think we have time for one last question, which is, if a project goes sideways, what's the most likely cause?
The number one cause of projects failing or projects going over budget or behind schedule, there's not even a close second. It is scope creep. That is the number one. Now, if you look at number two, you could look at things like poor planning. You could look at things like limited resources. But number one, there, again, not even a close second, everyone. It is scope creep. It is not having a change control system in place. So when your scope increases, you're not resetting any of your baselines. And now your new scope, this new broader set of work that you need to achieve is going off of the same budget and the same schedule that you had before. And it makes absolutely, if we look at it from the perspective of one of our project management classes here at New Horizons, you'll see it makes absolutely no sense. It makes no sense to not reset those baselines. Scope creep is the number one killer of projects.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, thank you so much again, Jason. It was really nice to have you here today. This concludes today's session. Thank you all again for joining us. And again, thank you, Jason, and we hope you'll join us for webinars in the future.
Thank you for having me. Thank you all for being here.